Throughout history, we have witnessed some of the most notorious serial killers committing unimaginable crimes. These guts often lead double lives, fooling society with their charm and intelligence while hiding their monstrous acts. So, from Ted Bundy to the world-famous BTK, here are 7 psychos and what happened to them after their capture. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. His crimes shocked the nation, and the way he presented himself made it even more disturbing. Bundy appeared to be an educated and charming man, but beneath that facade, he was a cold-blooded killer. In the 1970s, Bundy kidnapped, raped, and murdered at least 30 young women across several states. Some believe the number of victims could be much higher. He used his charm to lure women into situations where he could overpower them. Often, he would feign injury to appear less threatening, tricking his victims into helping him. Once he had them alone, his true nature emerged, and he would brutally attack them. His killing spree caused panic, especially because he could evade capture for so long. Bundy was captured multiple times, but managed to escape twice. His second escape, in particular, led to his final killing spree, which ended with his capture in Florida. His trial was one of the first to be nationally televised. He chose to represent himself in court, using his legal knowledge to manipulate the proceedings. But his charm couldn't save him. He was sentenced to death for his crimes in Florida, and after years of legal battles and appeals, Bundy was finally executed in the electric chair on January 24, 1989. Next, we have another psycho, who was another infamous serial killer whose crimes were beyond horrifying. John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was a successful businessman who lived in the Chicago area. He appeared to be a regular member of the community, even dressing up as a clown to entertain children at parties. But behind the friendly persona was a man responsible for the murders of at least 33 young men and boys. Gacy would lure his victims to his home, sometimes under the guise of offering them work or friendship. Once there, he would overpower them, often using trickery, such as pretending to perform magic tricks with handcuffs. After binding his victims, Gacy would sexually assault and torture them before eventually taking their lives. What made Gacy's crimes even more chilling was how he disposed of the bodies. He buried most of them in the crawl space beneath his house. The smell eventually led authorities to investigate, uncovering the gruesome truth. Gacy was arrested and put on trial for the murders. He was sentenced to death for his crimes, and after years on death row, Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes shocked the world because of their brutality and the disturbing nature of his acts. Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was responsible for the murders of 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991. His method of killing involved drugging his victims before strangling or stabbing them. But what set Dahmer apart from many other serial killers was what he did after the murders. He engaged in necrophilia, cannibalism, and dismemberment of the bodies. He kept body parts as trophies and even attempted to create zombie-like victims by drilling holes in their heads and injecting them with chemicals. Dahmer was eventually caught when one of his intended victims managed to escape and flag down police. When officers arrived at his apartment, they found a scene of unimaginable horror, including photographs of dismembered bodies and remains in various states of decomposition. Dahmer was arrested and confessed to his crimes in chilling detail. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, meaning he would never be released from prison. But his time in prison was cut short when a fellow inmate beat him to death on November 28, 1994. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, terrorized Southern California in the 1980s with a series of brutal home invasions. Over the course of a year, Ramirez killed 13 people, many of whom he sexually assaulted before murdering. His victims were often selected at random, making his crimes even more terrifying for the public. He would break into homes at night, attacking people while they slept, and his methods were incredibly violent. Ramirez would use guns, knives, and even blunt objects to kill his victims. In some cases, he left survivors behind, taunting them and telling them to remember his face. Ramirez was eventually captured thanks to a group of citizens who recognized him after his face had been widely publicized by the media. He was beaten by the crowd before being arrested by police. During his trial, Ramirez showed no remorse for his actions, often laughing and flashing satanic symbols to the cameras. He was sentenced to death in 1989, but he remained on death row for over 2 decades. Ramirez died of complications related to cancer on June 7, 2013, while still awaiting execution. Moving on to a female serial killer whose case has gained widespread attention, Aileen Wuornos. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos killed 7 men in Florida. She claimed that the men had either attempted to sexually assault her or had attacked her, and she was acting in self-defense. Wuornos had a troubled past, including a history of sexual abuse and homelessness, and she worked as a prostitute at the time of the murders. Her life had been marked by instability and violence, and her mental state was often called into question during her trial. Despite her claims of self-defense, the evidence showed that Wuornos had deliberately planned the murders. She was convicted and sentenced to death. Wuornos did not fight her sentence, and even requested that her execution be carried out sooner. On October 9, 2002, she was executed by lethal injection in Florida. Her case gained further notoriety after the release of the movie Monster, which told the story of her life and crimes. Wuornos remains a controversial figure, with some viewing her as a cold-blooded killer, while others see her as a victim of circumstance. David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam, terrorized New York City in the mid-1970s with a series of shootings. Berkowitz killed 6 people and wounded several others, often targeting young couples sitting in parked cars. His method was simple but effective, using a .44 caliber revolver to shoot his victims at close range. What made Berkowitz's crimes even more terrifying was the way he taunted the police and the media. He sent letters to the authorities, claiming that he was following orders from a demon who had taken control of his neighbor's dog. The media frenzy surrounding the case made Berkowitz a household name, and the city was in a state of panic. After a massive manhunt, Berkowitz was finally caught in 1977. He quickly confessed to the murders, though his claims about the demon were later dismissed as part of his mental illness. Berkowitz was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms and remains in prison to this day. In the years since his imprisonment, he has claimed to have found religion and now identifies as a born-again Christian. He has expressed remorse for his crimes, but for many, the horror of his actions will never be forgotten. Finally, we have a guy who was literally born to end others' life. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader, better known as the BTK Killer, eluded capture for over 30 years before finally being arrested in 2005. Rader was responsible for the murders of 10 people between 1974 and 1991. He earned his nickname from his method of killing, which involved binding, torturing, and killing his victims. Like many serial killers, Rader craved attention and would send taunting letters to the police and the media, detailing his crimes and mocking their inability to catch him. His letters provided crucial clues, but it wasn't until 2005 that authorities were able to link him to the murders using DNA evidence. Rader's capture was largely due to his own arrogance. He had sent a letter on a floppy disk to the police, thinking it couldn't be traced, but investigators were able to recover data from the disk that led them to Rader. He was arrested and quickly confessed to the killings. During his trial, Rader showed little remorse, calmly describing his murders in detail. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Today, Rader remains in prison, where he continues to serve his sentence. So, what do you think about these people? Comment down your thoughts right now. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well.